analyst and author extraordinaire of like a million books, Alan Dershowitz himself. Professor, welcome back, sir.
Thank you.
I feel like it's a new week. You probably have a new book out, so I don't even know which one is out. But
next week it'll be out, or 2 weeks.
All right, let me, in this final brief that the Democratic impeachment managers filed, they say that Trump's acts on January 6th, and I'm going to quote here, it says, the most grievous constitutional crime ever committed by a president. All right. Do you think that that is accurate or a bit hyperbole?
Well, it's worse than hyperbole. It's just dead wrong. It can't be a crime if it's constitutionally protected. It can't be both a crime and protected by the Constitution, one or the other. And it's so clearly protected by the Constitution. If you compare the president's speech, where he said he wanted people to protest peacefully and patriotically, to the speech made by Clarence Brandenburg, which led to the famous Brandenburg case, here was a Klansman with hoods and crosses and guns, calling for revengeance against senators and calling for the Jews to be sent back to Israel and blacks to be sent back to Africa. And the Supreme Court, in a unanimous decision, said that was constitutionally protected. Of course, this was constitutionally protected, and therefore it can't be any kind of a crime, certainly not the most grievous crime ever. Look, the only impeachment we've ever had in our history, which was constitutional, was Richard Nixon, who resulted in a resignation. The Bill Clinton one was not constitutional. The original one against Andrew Johnson was not constitutional. And this one clearly is not constitutional. What's even more worrisome is that a group of 144 professors, many of them my colleagues from Harvard, sent a threatening letter, basically, to the lawyers for Trump, saying, don't you dare to even raise the First Amendment defense, because if you do, it will be unethical and subject you to disciplinary proceedings, including possibly disbarment. Fortunately, these lawyers listened to me and not to 144 people. I told them that as a legal ethics professor for 25 years and a constitutional lawyer for 55 years, I assure them that not only should they raise the First Amendment argument, but they must raise it. It would be unethical not to raise it because it's a very strong argument.
That means, by the way, just so we're clear on the math, you passed the bar when you were 5. I just want to be clear on that number.
I guess I don't have to ask you what you think of Trump's legal team using the First Amendment as a strategy here. Clearly, you think this is the right strategy for them to be doing that. What I do want to ask you is the impeachment managers, they have already come back in their brief and said, kind of given a rebuttal to using this First Amendment. They say, President Trump's incitement of insurrection was itself a frontal assault on the First Amendment. As a matter of law and logic, not to mention simple common sense, he attempted resilience on free speech principles is utterly baseless. So, obviously, I mean, is this the right rebuttal for them if Trump's team is coming with this First Amendment strategy?
Makes no sense. When McCarthy went after the communists in the 1950s, he said the same thing. He said communism is a direct assault on the First Amendment, direct assault on the Constitution. And he was 100% right. Communism was a direct assault, but it was constitutionally protected. And the Supreme Court has said that many assaults, look, Brandenburg, what could be more of an assault on the Constitution than getting up there and saying, send the Jews back to Israel and blacks back to Africa and take revenge on senators? That's not the constitutional criteria. The constitutional criteria is, was it an incitement? Was it like shouting fire? I hate that expression. But when you shout fire, everybody leaves. Nobody thinks about it. Whereas here, most of the people who heard the president didn't even go to the Capitol. Most of the people who went to the Capitol didn't go inside. Most of the people who went inside didn't destroy property, and hardly anybody killed people. Those people deserve very serious penalties. But this was not constitutionally unprotected. It was constitutionally protected. And I think the fact that so many scholars have said it's not shows you how result-oriented they are.
So I think there, good. Let me ask you an interesting question. The last time that the president was impeached, a year ago, he had all of the apparatus around him to respond and to rebut charges. Like, obviously at his team, he's been taken off Twitter, he's been taken off YouTube. He doesn't have the trappings of the White House and all that. What should he, if he calls you and says, Professor, what should I be doing this week? What do you tell him he should be doing or not?
He should be doing nothing that brings himself in the public light. He should not be arguing the election was stolen. He should not be arguing that it was fraud. His lawyers should not be arguing that because they'll lose senators if they do. They should limit their argument to 3 points. Number one, the Senate has no jurisdiction over a former president. If they had jurisdiction over a former office holder, they could impeach Nikki Haley tomorrow if they think that she poses a threat, possibly in 2024 to Biden. After all, she held office 3 years ago. They could impeach Bill Clinton now without any statute of limitations. So that's number one argument. Number two argument, the speech was protected by the Constitution. Number three, the Senate can't violate the First Amendment in its impeachment. Give you an example. You know, the House managers say the First Amendment isn't applicable. Impeachment stands on its own. Let's assume a Muslim American gets elected president and the Democrat House decides or the Republican House decides to impeach that person because he's Muslim. But the Constitution says no religious test shall ever be required. But the House managers would say that's not relevant to impeachment because impeachment is political. But of course, they're bound by the Constitution. And the First Amendment says Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech, and no law has been interpreted to mean take no action that has consequences. It doesn't matter if it's a law or administrative action. So those are the three arguments I would make. I think those are successful. They're not frivolous arguments, and they should be made, and no law professors should try to intimidate lawyers out of making those important arguments.
Yeah, it's interesting, by the way, because I asked you this last time. As a non-lawyer, I read the text in the Constitution, and I just don't. I'm fascinated to see people who have law degrees, who have, taught constitutional law, come out and say, of course this makes sense. It's fascinating because every time that you come on, you break it down so well and so in common sense.
But these same law professors would be making exactly the opposite argument if it were Hillary Clinton who were on trial,
right,
if it were a Democrat on trial. They do not pass the shoe on the other foot test. They come to conclusions first, and then they stretch, pull, tug, shrink the Constitution to make it fit. Professor Lawrence Tribe, that's what he specialized in for the last 50 years, making the Constitution come out according to his own partisan political views. Everybody knows that. Everybody understands that. Right. But because he's a Democrat and because he comes out on the side that most professors support, they give him a pass on that, and they attack me because I'm principled and stand by the Constitution regardless of whose political ox is being gored.
That you do. Thank you once again, as always, for breaking this down to us. I hope a lot of people just got the answers as they're discussing this at home now. Professor, always great to see you, and look forward already to our next engagement.